It has been a few days now, but I am still not over the events of the last episode in X-Men 97, where they kill off a major character rather unexpectedly. Yes, I am talking about the shocking death of Magneto at the hands of Apocalypse as a helpless Xavier watches. Now, this is not one of those death sequences that takes place off-screen, and you can literally see that Magneto is obliterated. However, everything said and done, there is a lot to this particular death scene than what meets the eye. I mean, if you are familiar with the depths of X-Men comic books, you would know that this might not be a plain and simple death where Magneto is gone forever. He might be back, and he might be back in a whole new avatar. In this video, I will explore those possibilities as I look into the various ways that the show might bring him back.
You have so often lied to me. Tell him it will be all right.
How Magneto's death apparently takes place. So if you have been watching the ongoing second season of X-Men 97, you know that the two-part episode, Rise of Apocalypse, focused on the X-Men who were stranded in ancient Egypt. This included Professor Xavier, Magneto, Rogue, Nightcrawler, and Beast, and they came across Nur, who was yet to become the dreaded Apocalypse. Now, the simple thing to do would be to kill Nur before he became invincible, but Magneto had other ideas. He thought it might be worthwhile to attempt changing Nur into someone who can use his forces for good, and in doing so, he could alter the future and prevent the Genosha massacre. Of course, this plan was extremely dangerous, as we found out in the third episode after Nur found out that the X-Men were time travelers who had lied to him. But the sudden attack from Pharaoh Rama-Tut interrupted his vengeance, and in Rise of Apocalypse Part 2, Nur gives them another chance as they together set out to find the temple that holds cosmic powers. Well, it doesn't end well because eventually Nur embraces his fate after discovering what he is meant to become. Rama-Tut flees and most of the X-Men get back to their own timeline courtesy of Bishop, but Magneto chooses to stay back and make an attempt to fix things. First, he uses every extent of his power to contain a black hole created by Apocalypse's ship above Rama-Tut's city, and while he saves thousands of lives, he is severely weakened. When Apocalypse finds him in a near-death situation with a desperate Xavier helplessly trying to reach him, he obliterates him, and only his helmet is left behind. Bishop rescues a heartbroken Xavier and takes him back to the original 90s timeline. Is this a clever nod to introduce Onslaught? I think one of the best things about X-Men 97 is how the show brings in some of the finest X-Men comic book stories and gives them a twist. So far, we have seen bits of everything from famous story arcs like the trial of Magneto, Fatal Attractions, the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, and the rise of Apocalypse. Now, whatever I am about to say next is actually rooted in the extensive comic book lore, so it cannot be dismissed outright even though I am only speculating here. I am tempted to believe a popular fan theory doing the rounds right now, and this is about the introduction of Onslaught. The apparent death of Magneto only sets it up stronger, and let me take you back to a decisive moment in Season 1 to give you some more context. When Magneto went berserk on Wolverine and stripped the adamantium from his bones, he was almost impossible to be stopped. Moreover, he was all set to launch a deadly electromagnetic pulse that would threaten all of humanity. Pushed to such extremes, Professor Xavier had to do something drastic, and he went into Magneto's mind and tried to take control in order to reverse the damage. However, things did not go down so smoothly in the comic book narrative. In the comics, Magneto unleashed an EMP and ripped the adamantium out of Wolverine, and Xavier had to step in to do something that he doesn't ethically agree with. He shut down Magneto's mind completely, and this left him in a comatose state. All this happens in the climax of the Fatal Attractions crossover, when the X-Men confront Magneto on his orbital base, Avalon. Wolverine attacks Magneto, and the latter uses his magnetic powers to rip all the adamantium out of Wolverine. He does this on a molecular level, and the damage is so extreme that Wolverine nearly dies because it overwhelms his healing abilities. It was Jean Grey who held his body together using her telekinetic powers, and Professor Xavier supported his mind so that he didn't go into shock or simply go insane from the pain. This is also a pivotal moment in the comic book narrative because it lays out in clear terms that Wolverine's claws are actually bone claws once the metal is gone. As far as Xavier's action on Magneto is concerned, you have to understand that this is not something that he does willfully. But after watching his old friend go out of control, Xavier doesn't really have a choice, and he realizes that Magneto is too far gone to be reasoned with. As he mind wipes Magneto and leaves him in a coma, it takes a toll on Professor Xavier as well, because it is everything that he stands against. He breaks his long-held moral rule against mind wiping, and the later stories indicate that the guilt of this incident is overwhelming for him. In the comics, the consequences are pretty long-term. Wolverine spends years without adamantium and operates with his bone claws and a more vulnerable skeleton. Magneto also goes MIA for some time, and he returns in Uncanny X-Men number 350, which explores the consequences of his mind wiping and a partial undoing of it. On the other hand, it has a severe impact on Xavier himself. Magneto's rage, hatred, and the darker emotions imprint onto Xavier's psyche, and this is eventually what creates the powerful psychic entity Onslaught. Basically, Magneto's act of extreme violence horrified the X-Men and Xavier, and he had tried to balance his ideals with the reality of mutant persecution all his life. It is his rage and despair at the assault that pushed his usual moral restraint, and his negative side created Onslaught. You see why I find it so relevant in X-Men 97, as his entire belief is shaken to the core, yet again by the blatant violence of Apocalypse. Who can forget the iconic Onslaught saga back in 1996? Onslaught was almost a god-level psionic entity, and it required the X-Men to team up with Fantastic Four and Avengers to defeat him. So if I go by this story, does the return of Magneto in X-Men 97 have a possibility of mirroring his story in the comics? Well, in the comics, Magneto gets healed off-panel, and the core explanation is that he survives the mind wipe and is found in a comatose state, and later his memories and consciousness are reconstructed so that he can re-enter the story as Magneto yet again. It is Astra who finds Magneto's comatose body and recovers him in this state, and even though his mind is shattered, his body isn't. Astra then clones Magneto and creates a younger amnesiac version called Joseph, and he shows up around the X-Men, and he is even believed to be Magneto for a while. He has no memory of his past, and a nun at an orphanage takes him in. Later he joins the X-Men and acts as a reforming Magneto. This is why if you read 90s X-Men in order, it almost seems like Magneto came back as a more uncertain, repentant character, when in reality he is actually a clone. As for the real Magneto, it is discovered that Joseph is a clone and Magneto is in the care of Astra. He is repaired using Shi'ar technology, and his memories are restored along with his personality. It comes down to a battle between Magneto and Joseph, where Magneto wins and Joseph is left amnesiac again, and this is when the restored original Magneto steps back into the game. There have been a few later stories that build on this status quo, and Xavier can be seen assisting Magneto rebuilding and stabilizing his memories and mental state. As far as X-Men 97 is concerned, a return like this might not be on the cards. The main problem is that he has been blasted away so hard that his physical body doesn't even exist. Thus, the way he can return is if his consciousness is somehow retained. I think this is where Onslaught comes into the picture. The way Xavier lashes out at Apocalypse after his friend is killed also indicates in that direction. When have you known Xavier to say things like Apocalypse deserved to be left out in the desert and he wishes Baal never found him and he baked in the sun? To add to the insult, Apocalypse completely disregards him and says that he doesn't want to hurt someone so powerless and insignificant. I would say that is enough trauma to put together a lifetime worth of repressed bad thoughts, and this is where the alter ego Onslaught might come into the picture. It would be wrong to expect something similar to the comic book narrative, but what we can expect is a version of Professor Xavier who is like the Onslaught we know. This would actually be a nice way to introduce a new villain or anti-hero character, and this might be how Magneto is eventually brought back. But the creation of Onslaught is not the only indication that Magneto might be back. There are some other interesting theories on this that point to the same possibility. What if Magneto is resurrected as a Horseman of Apocalypse? This will defy all the known comic book lore, but X-Men 97 has shown that it does not shy away from giving new twists to the familiar stories. At this point, it is almost a certainty that we will see Gambit as a Horseman of Apocalypse going ahead in the show. Even Gambit is dead from the earlier season, and if he can be brought back, what is stopping Apocalypse from doing the same with Magneto? He said he disregards Professor Xavier because of his obvious weakness, but he said no such thing about Magneto, and if you think about it, Magneto offers him a powerful option to fight alongside him as he takes on the X-Men in the original 90s timeline. Just imagine the plight of Rogue if both Magneto and Gambit appear as Horsemen. A love life couldn't get much worse. Time travel makes deaths temporary. Magneto is dead in one timeline, but that doesn't mean that he is dead in every timeline. The show has already introduced time travel, and we have fully capable time travelers like Cable, Bishop, and Forge. With so much of jumping around timelines, it is only a matter of time before Magneto can be brought back from a time when he is not dead. It takes so little to alter this, and Magneto would be right back, even without the added twist of being a Horseman of Apocalypse.
Gambit.
Resurrections and fake deaths are not unheard of in the X-Men franchise. If you think that this is something unheard of, you are mistaken. In the extensive X-Men comic book lore and in adaptations, I have encountered various instances where similar fake deaths and resurrections have taken place. For instance, in the original X-Men the Animated Series, Morph, who was apparently killed by Sentinels, comes back as an agent of Mr. Sinister. Similarly, Jean Grey has died and got resurrected, and even Professor Xavier has been back from a near-death situation. Given such a history, it is extremely unlikely that the death of Magneto is permanent. In fact, I find it all the more improbable because he has died at the hands of Apocalypse, who is not the one to miss the opportunity to utilize a powerful mutant like Magneto. Already there is a very strong speculation about Gambit making a comeback, and I am quite sure that you will see him as one of Apocalypse's Horsemen in the upcoming episodes. As I have said before, nothing stops him from doing the same with Magneto as well. I know there are so many options right now for the writers to handle the whole Magneto situation. However, considering the gravity of the character and the scope from all the comic book stories, I get the feeling that it is not all over for him yet. I mean, he is just too big a character to get rid of so early, especially since X-Men 97 plans to run for at least a couple more seasons. Now the real question is how Magneto is brought back, and as I have discussed in this video, there are several ways to do that. I would love to hear your take on the matter in the comments, and feel free to drop in your own theories as well. Also, if you appreciate the efforts to bring you this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more such videos.